Okay, John, let's get started. We got a lot of people coming in here and appreciate you guys all joining us. And this is the second one we've done. We've done this with Calix Krabby last week, and this week, lucky to have John Buck in here. And John, well, most of the guys, if you don't know me, I've been doing this for 20 years, training visual performance skills. I learned from the master, my father, Dr. Bill Harrison, who started in the 1970s with Kansas City Royals, Royals Baseball Academy, and George Brett, and um, and so I've been lucky enough to carry on the tradition and add vision training, and I've gotten to know John Buck over I don't know how long, John, but John played 11 years in the big leagues and retired. Now he's coaching kids, and he's was last year. I don't know, John. We haven't talked about this. Are you still hitting long balls on the World Long Drive?
I do. I've reduced some of my schedule just because my wife has gone back to med school. So apparently it's not my turn anymore. So it's she's the priority in our schedule. So she's taken up a lot of that where I got to move into some of the roles where she's at full-time school. I'm not going to do the full tour, but I'll get qualified and then hopefully go for the big tournament at the end of the year.
There we go.
So my ranking, I was up to like 45th in the world rankings for long drive, but so I'll have to forfeit my world ranking and just go for the top at the end of the year. But I don't know how many people are going to catch Kyle Berkshire. He knows how to move the club. Oh, he knows how to move it.
What makes a World Long Drive champion successful?
Well, and a lot of stuff which we talked about when I started doing that, some of the stuff that you were working with TPI and stuff was with baseball, the contact, the room for error is a lot more compared to golf when you're doing long drive, and that's creating club speed upwards of 150, 160 miles an hour to where you're trying to create exit velocity. And then before I could create those velocities, but smash factor, where you hit it on the club, I mean, it's within quarter of an inch. And then also that attack angle of 4 degrees inward with a 3 degrees closed face, getting correct spin to get the right trajectory with the right launch angle. All that plays into factor. We hear a whole bunch about it, about hitting in baseball now, but golf, you take that even up to the utmost degree because every little micro inch makes a big difference when you're swinging a golf club, as you can imagine. And too, a lot of the stuff, getting to flow or zone, a lot of the stuff with the visual training stuff, which that hit is, it was huge because that getting into those, because you get 3-minute sets and you get 8 balls within those 3 minutes. And to being locked in for those 8 balls, you kind of trigger into that flow or zone state where you have to be locked in, and that neural vision and dynamic vision of where you're able to lock in for those 8 balls when you're moving as fast as you can. It's a lot harder hitting it off the tee than you would think.
Yeah, I would imagine that one of the things that happens, and this happens in baseball and softball as well, is getting big and wanting to do more and trying to do more.
Yeah.
And as you could probably attest to, when you tried to do more, how successful were you?
Yeah, that's why you see it's funny because if you've ever watched the World Long Drive, you see guys, you get 8 balls and they're lucky if they get 1 or 2 because they would, they're moving so fast and over swinging a lot of the time, just trying to get that one. Where I was a little different because I knew I was a little different because of the experience I had, and it was one of the advantages I had when I went up. And you get 4 guys on the tee box on the stage at first, and you walk up there. And when I looked over and see the guy that I'm going against, and I see his hand shaking as he's putting the tee down, I'm like, kind of looking at him like, all right, my advantage is I'm not feeling all geeked up and jacked up like that. And I saw that I had more balls in the grid, which, upped my chances of getting balls in the grid because a lot of times I'd move on, advance later into the rounds because they wouldn't get a ball into the grid. And the grid is 45 yards wide. But getting, like I said, one inch off of that smash factor or launch angle can make that, throw that off to where you're not getting the ball in the grid. And when you're trying to move max, even with the ball sitting there on standing still on a tee, and you try to go max, your body, what you feel isn't real, is what one of my hitting coaches would tell me. What you feel is not real. And when you're trying to muscle up and go, you actually create length in your swing, which when you're trying to snap that club to make that snap factor in those clubs, those airs in your swing come out pretty relevant when it's that ball sitting on the tee and you have nothing. You can't say, well, that guy was throwing me a sinker or a slider or a riser. If you're a softball player, that ball was on a tee, so that was your body that made that ball not hit the smash factor on the club.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what we're talking about. It's when you try to amp up and create more rather than sticking to your fundamentals and also not using that adrenaline. Because I think what I would see is those guys would try to, that when they felt jacked up and you'd see them adrenaline pumping, they couldn't even put their tee into the ground because they get so amped up. I saw that I was able to, stay within myself and not try to do too much, and it became advantage. I was able to use that energy into my swing and let that those butterflies when you're on deck, knowing that your body, hey, my body's getting ready to go into a zone or flow state, that I would learn how to accept that and use that as an advantage, where I could see the other guys would let that kind of take over the swing and they would just kind of lose it because of that amount of adrenaline and how jacked they would be, kind of throw them off once they get up on the grid.
Yeah, interesting. Now let's going back, John, a little bit on the baseball side. Give a little bit of history. There was a question that someone had inputted. We got a lot of questions. I doubt we'll get to them, but is what did it take to get to the next level? And I know you and I have had a lot of conversations, and I think a good thing, and we got some kids on here, is knowing that as a youth, what you did and the variety of things you did, and what helped you keep moving and going on the next level and spending 11 years in the big leagues?
It's kind of a loaded question, as you can imagine. I think almost everything I did in athletics helped me get to the big leagues, or to that 1% of the world. And I think it was all of that combined is what helped me. And to give a little background, I had an uncle who played football at Nebraska. His name was Dave Burke. It was during the Irving Fryer years. And they had Nebraska was kind of the first one that had the psycho-cybernetics, if you remember that, when that first started kind of coming out with. And I remember getting the tapes with that. And I applied those tapes to almost everything that I did. And at the time, I was in gymnastics. I was in downhill skiing. I was in golf. I was in baseball, basketball, hockey. So I kind of did it all. But what I gathered from all those, which like I said, all of them went into it, was learning how to create flow or zone state to be able to narrow my focus into that one task I was doing. All of it, in my mind, was always fueled to baseball because that was my love and my passion. But I was able to get the experience from all of those to feed it into that. But what I think what heightened that above all those other sports that I did, and I was good and excelled at all of them, but the difference maker with baseball was borderline obsessed, is the best way I could put it. Like I said, I played all those other sports. I was really good. I probably could have went to downhill skiing. I could have, uncles all played in the NFL. I was, although the runt of the family, still thought I could have been tight end.
Still a pretty big guy.
Yeah, but in my family, I was a runt, if you can believe it. But I was obsessed with baseball. Things that made me good at baseball: the hand-eye coordination, the calling the game, being able to not get 4 hits in the game and still be able to have the influence the outcome of the game. Those were the things that I loved about the game. And obviously, being a catcher, those are kind of unique things. But like I said, all that stuff where I was obsessed, all the things that I did. For example, what I mean by that, all the sports that helped me is gymnastics. I know I was able to probably, up until I quit, me, AJ Przinsky, and Molina were the ones that were games played and innings caught I was right there with them at the top with the least amount of injuries. And the only injury I had was a foul ball off my finger. I didn't really have any, injuries, so to say, with my knees or my ankles or my hips or back, things like that in those natures. But I think it was because of my flexibility and mobility that I had from gymnastics.
And that's probably a good time right now with people not being able to get outside is to work on that flexibility.
Flexibility, mobility, and the things that you can, and also too with gymnastics, like before you go into an event, like I said, even with long drive, that how you feel like on deck, you feel that rumbling in your gut, that almost those butterflies, and helped me realize like, hey, that's my body getting ready to go into that flight or flight, that zone or flow state, and that I didn't become afraid of it. I actually learned to enjoy it and taking it as an advantage of like, all right, my body's getting ready to become superhuman, if you will. And through all those experience of outside the box of baseball, helped me realize to control that, so that it helped me control that once I was in what I love, my passion, baseball, to use that as a tool.
Now you brought up flow state quite a bit, and a lot of people know what that is, some people don't. But how would you describe what the flow state is to you, so especially as a baseball player?
Well, let's take some of the stuff that really attracted me to your stuff, right? When I first, this is literally the book I had from. You see, it's all beat up, right? It's just still in here in my office, but I remember getting this, and I remember, like I said, I had psychocybernetics from my uncle who put it in Nebraska, and he brought it home to me, and doing all these hand drills where you can independently move your fingers and do those type of things. And then also with this depth perception is your brain has to go into a focus where you can't be thinking about other things. You got to be narrow in thought, and to where your breath becomes, your heart rate and your breath becomes lower and controlled. Your outside distractions seem to dissipate away, and you become very narrow focused. And that's when your heightened awareness, intuitiveness. That's when you're in a spot where you're so locked in. When the pitcher starts wiggling his finger, you're so intuitively locked in on him that you pick up that finger when he does that, when he's throwing that change up. And the tool that I know that you guys end up giving me was the two little dots. And I remember it quickly put me into that phase, says that psychocybernetics and all the long stuff that I would do before game to happen. But that would quickly, all of a sudden I would be able to bring those in, because if those two dots, sometimes I'd be so angry, right, from the previous at bat before I go out there to catch and call a game, I couldn't even slow myself down to put those two little dots together to make that one 3D image. And once I got to the point where I was able to do that, that helped me. Like all of a sudden, those thoughts went away. I became so concentrated in that some of those very intuitive things would pick up, and all of a sudden the lineups would be more relevant in my mind. The guys coming up and my game plan would come to the forefront of my mind, because it would refocus me, because all that stuff that fogs your mind and gets in the way, would seem to dissipate away, because I would go into a zone flow state just to put that little dot together, which would just
a lot of times we talk about that as refocusing, learning to refocus. And it gets your brain in kind of a balanced state, gets the eyes functioning, and it just was a way to kind of get you focused on the task. And I think that's one thing, for what we kind of talk about is what's the task at hand. And people get caught up in the goals, and I got to get a hit, I got to get on base, I got to move runners over, I don't want to embarrass myself. But really, it's kind of like what you said you basically said it as being highly visual and picking up the information that you needed to be successful. And whether it's, like you said, the fingers in the pitcher's hand, the glove, the movement, but getting really good. And John, you can explain this maybe even better, is how good did you get at picking the ball up out of the release point?
It became a real, and it was funny because it became so natural to where I would go do camps and stuff in the off season, right? And you would steer how people would say, all right, get a overall vision of the pitcher. Say if we're picking up release points, go to release point as a hitter. And it was so natural for me because I do it as a catcher and then also as a pitcher, but get that soft vision where you're kind of overall looking at the pitcher, narrow down to the pitcher's jersey or his hat, and then to the arm slot, to where guys were trying to instruct people how to do that. And I was almost like, I don't know if do I do all those steps? Do I do it? Because it was so natural for me to go lock into that. But when I got to where I consciously thought about it and I started teaching my own kids and stuff like that, that I was like, all right, I actually do that. But I did it so naturally and effortlessly. It wasn't a step-by-step process. It was my brain just kind of naturally did it. It was kind of like all the way into a funnel into that. And it was timing as well. Timing into that funnel of that locked in spot, so that when my eyes focused in on that spot, it's sitting there waiting for it. And then that popped into that slot. It timed it with the arm speed to get in there, so that when I'm focused on that finite spot on the ball, that it was clear, decisive, and
what kept you from getting there all the time? Because there's times that you weren't that good, but there's times it makes it difficult. So, and I know there's a lot of players and coaches in this chat room here, but what kept you? What were some of the problems that allowed you not to get to the release point?
Score makers and score breakers is what I would call them. When I teach it with my kids now, is score makers are things that make you feel good, make you feel where you're going, everything's going good, and you're hardly thinking about it, right? And those are usually things that create success or create confidence. But the score breakers are those things that may add thoughts to yourself. And for our little guys, it's all of a sudden, I have to hit this pitch, or I got to hit it, or is he going to throw me this breaking ball? Is he going to do this? Those random thoughts that get in your head, which to the day I got done playing, those were always constantly there. So one of the things that I would try to do is narrow my focus to my process, just refocusing on to my approach. I hit solid with fastballs middle of the way. I hit solid fastballs middle of the way. I hit solid fastballs middle of the way. I hit solid fastballs middle of the way. And you can see I repeatedly said that to myself. It was very narrow focus, and legitimately to the core of what I want to do was hit the ball solid. Not hit a home run, not do this, I don't care about the result. My objective was to hit the ball solid and adjust off speed. And if I could do that,
aren't you going against today's grain a little bit?
but that's today's grain's also, I don't necessarily agree with everything that went on, but because I know from experience of what I've had, what made me successful and not successful is focusing on what I can control and not what I can't control, and focusing on that helped me not go in the future or in the past. When those are the things, I think, when our brain and the thoughts go too far in the future and too far in the past when we're performing, it's not healthy. Now, if we go in the past, it's usually to learn, right? It's got to be in to learn what happened, what pitch, how did I react to that? Was I out front? Those things, those nature, or how did they react on this pitch when I called? But going in the future, I think is good. So you get to lay the foundation of where you want to go and how you want to get there and what you visualize. Because I also think that makes you feel that it's real. Your brain, your subconscious starts to feel like that's real. Like when I visualize and I think about those things, it's about that ball going out of the right center field wall. But my approach when I'm in the box, it's to simplify it and put that approach to I hit fastballs middle of the line.
Yeah, visualization is obviously very important, and I'm sure I don't think enough people do a very good job at it. But I know a lot of the great athletes are very good visualizers, and seeing what you want to do. I think part of the things that happens with visualization is we tend to think about what we don't want to do. Don't mess up. Don't pop up. Don't strike out. Instead of seeing themselves hitting rockets and hitting shots. And if I had a recommendation that we do talk to a lot of players about this, is create your own highlight video to help you visualize. And some people talk about this highlight video having 5 or 6 or 100 different highlights, but just take that one really good clip and just replay that really good clip of that real good line drive that you have, and even add some music to it and make your own little music video so that you can replay it and re-feel it when you're struggling. You can go back to that song and go, here's that hit that I really like. And I know you have felt that in the past as well, John.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had a guy that I end up, Jim Fannin, who I know that we've talked about with, is he's the zone coach. You can look his stuff up too. Is we had a routine that we would do, and he would say, you know, music, one, is gateway to the zone, or gateway to the soul, right? Is because it makes you feel right away. You can have songs that trigger stuff, makes you how to feel, and that's kind of obviously why do we have walk-up songs, is to your point on that, that should make you feel that. So that's why that's important. We've discussed that before too, and is because that makes you feel that. And also too, is a good habit is replace those bad at-bats with a good quality at-bat. So say if I struck out with a slider down low and away, right? I would fall asleep, and before you go to sleep, 30 minutes before you go to bed, I think we have some neurologists on here, and they can verify this, is before you go to bed, that last 30 minutes before you go to bed has a big impact on what you dream about, what you think about when you're in REM sleep. So if you go into bed and you get in the habit of replaying those at-bats, replacing those bad at-bats with a good result, say you visualize yourself in real time in that person, taking that pitch and seeing that, and then reacting on maybe him, put the image of your head, because you can still have those visuals in your head where you're stay back on that slider, maybe you hung it and hit the right side. And I have this visual I can even pull up in my mind vividly, as much detail in Detroit, off Verlander, in right center where the wall caves in. I remember it was a cloudy day. I can bring those up, and it's a skill to be able to do it. And it was practice, because it was a practice that I did with Jim Fannin every night with that. What Ryan's talking about is I would see that through my head. And when you visualize and replace that, while you're in REM sleep for, I think it's 20 or 30 minute increments in that 4 hours of REM sleep, your body doesn't know the difference between conscious or subconscious. It will replace that bad at bat with those thoughts that you had in that last 30 minutes before your bed, when you go to bed. So it's kind of a brain hack. And also when you wake up from sleep, you're in that kind of that fog when you first wake up. If you replay those at bats in your mind again, while you're kind of in that very, very, I guess, I forget what the name of that stage is as you're waking up, but you're very receptive to that thing. And I don't think there's any reason why scholars and everybody, and even religious figures, say, why do we wake up and go to sleep with prayer? You're in a very, very intuitive, receptive mind frame to let's brain hack it with some baseball and some hitting knowledge, right? And use that space to replace and play those at bats, because again, your brain doesn't know any difference between conscious, subconscious when you're asleep. And when you're hitting bombs for 4 hours in REM sleep, your body, that's why when you wake up from a dream and you're sweating,
you train your body what to do.
Exactly. So that when you get into that, or sometimes that's that same state when people say, what was that pitch you hit? And you're like, I don't know. It was there and I crushed it,
And that's a good, I just saw the ball so damn good. I have no idea what I saw. That's a good thing.
Exactly. And I think you're hitting those two in the experiences I've had. It's that same spot where your body you're in that flow or zone state to where your body, kind of that out of body experience where your body's just reacting to it. And that's that area where you can't explain it. We're all trying to get there to repeat it. It's how do we narrow that gap to get there? And I think training and doing these subtle things inside that brain space is huge, because those have been the things that have been the huge factor for me.
Yeah. John, I want to go back. We touched upon it, but I want to go a little bit more in depth on pitch recognition. That's a big buzzword that a lot of people use, is pitch recognition. I want to get better pitch recognition. And, to me, doing this for so long, you and I have had this conversation and trying to explain to everyone, it's not a simple thing. It's kind of a process of a lot of different stuff that needs to happen. And what people get caught up in pitch recognition is seeing the ball early, which to me is very important. And we touched upon that about getting to the release point, getting your eyes there. But if you don't have any experiences of what that pitch does, it's really hard to understand what that pitch is going to do, even if you see it okay. So pitch recognition, and I know we got Dr. Fallon that I may have to get him in there to answer some of this too, but it's really, getting to see the whole pitch, learning to see what the pitch is going to do. If you don't know what a pitch, how the break's going to happen, or you don't know what the spin's going to do, you're never going to understand by just seeing what the early is. So it's taking the end and taking the early spot. And I guess, we talked about this a little bit. It's kind of like if you're driving to a new area, to a new facility, you're kind of looking all over the place. You're uncomfortable. Am I in the right spot? Am I not in the right spot? And then once you've been there, now the next time you do it, you go, oh, I know exactly where I'm going. I'm going to turn right here, turn left here. It's based off all these experiences. And I think when people, when I talk about pitch recognition, pitch recognition is two parts. It's how well you see the ball early, but also how well you see the ball deep. And when I say deep, it's contact point, but even if we take the pitch, you want to see what the late trajectory it is. And the more late trajectory that they see, the better their early recognition is going to get to. And I know we've talked about this as a hitter, but even as a catcher, how important that is to you. So maybe you can expand upon that.
Yeah. And it was funny, as you're saying that, as the hitter, I'll say the hitter part real quick. When I was saying off of Verlander, when I was like in detail in my mind, visually on that pitch, I can see that pitch where I swung and missed at. But in my mind, I can see that pitch go by me as I'm taking it, like in great detail, where not just on seeing the ball go by, but I can see in my eyes looking at the lower left-hand part of the ball and what the spin looks like. You see, as I'm closing my eyes while I'm doing that, I can see that spin on that. I can see the exact spot on the ball. I'm not looking for the whole baseball. I'm looking for the lower left-hand part of that baseball to narrow focus in on that spot of the ball. And so that was kind of, as you were saying that was hitting up in my, I need to tell them this, because in my mind, what I'm saying, visualize, track that ball and replace that bad at bat with that good at bat. In my mind, in my eyes, and where I'm focusing and what I'm seeing in my head as it goes by is, as you saw, it's my head tracking that ball as it goes past me all the way to the catcher. And then also when I'm hitting that, it's seeing that ball, even though we don't see the ball all the way to the bat, I see that ball all the way to that good spot, contact spot of where I'm hitting the ball.
You're seeing as long as possible.
As long as, and maybe visualize that longer than we can humanly see the ball. But, they say that you don't see it, but I swear, I don't know if I was looking in the wrong spot. There's been a couple of times where I've seen the ball hit the bat.
Well, we could probably do a full hour on that one.
Right. Don't get us started. I know that's a conversation we've gotten to on a few occasions. But to kind of touch on some of the stuff that you were saying, as you were saying that with catching, let me put this in perspective. Matt Harvey. Okay, when I was catching Matt Harvey in St. Louis and in New York that year, when he was throwing 97 mile an hour sliders with 98 to 100 mile an hour sinkers, going like this with balls that were taken off up out of the way, throwing two different types of curve balls, tightening up his slider more like a cutter to a left-hander. That's a lot of array of pitches that are really hard. And if you don't know exactly where they're going, you're not going to catch them right. And especially, as you know, coaches, catching is a lot of it with timing and bringing you back into the zone and timing. And if I don't know how those pitches are react or experiences of how those balls are going to move and what he's going to do to try to tighten that up, the connection with my pitcher, and how he's going to try to put more depth on the ball, my timing is going to be off on it. And also my receiving of the ball is not going to be as crisp. I'm going to have some sore thumbs and sore fingers because I'm not going to be catching that ball correctly, which will lead to my exchange being more choppy if the runner happens to go. Those are all things, having to know how the ball moves and having my eyes in the correct spot on the ball play a big factor on how I receive the ball and how crisp and clean it'll even lead into my transfers.
Yeah, one of the things you've said a key word a few times, and I just want to point it out, is could be, the upper half, lower half,
Hey,
inside.
wait, can you start that over? I don't know if everybody else, it was a little choppy for me, and I feel like it was,
Let me,
yeah, do it over, because I think you just like said the secret to everything that everybody turned in on, and it zapped out.
that's
right
why I
there.
muted it.
Yeah, so
It's everyone's secret.
yeah, you just told the secret of life, and now, so go over again.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what you had said a few times is looking for a part of the ball. And to me, that is a key component. Is you're not looking for the ball, you're looking at a part of the ball. And it's the idea of aim small, miss small. And it might be looking for the lower half, the inside half, the upper half, the outside half. It could be different parts of the ball that might affect your swing, might affect how you catch a ball. And, something as a hitter is, and I use this a lot, is if a hitter tends to be hitting a lot of balls in the ground, they tend to make a physical change. They want to, drop their elbow, do some kind of thing. But part of the problem is maybe visually they're not giving their brain the right information to react. So if they're hitting the ball on the ground, maybe what they need to do is look for, a part of the ball that's the lower part of the ball, something that allows their swing to do what it needs to do.
And that's actually why I picked the lower left-hand part of the baseball receiving as a catcher, is because we know as get back here, as if I'm looking for my, boom, we got a baseball. If I'm looking for the lower left-hand part of the baseball, and as catchers, if I'm catching the whole ball and a lot of movement comes in like this, if I'm trying to get to the lower left-hand part of the ball, I'm catching the lower left-hand part of the ball. That'll keep me from getting thumbed a lot of times. So that's why I like looking for the lower left-hand part of the ball. Plus, as I'm trying to catch the lower left-hand part of the ball, I move up through the strike zone for the lower pitch, but also catch over the top for the top pitch and come up for the away pitch, and also catch and go over for a little bit of framing for my catchers, catching coaches. But that's how it helped me catching for the lower left-hand part of the ball. And also I've got real familiar with the lower left-hand part of the ball of how the spin looked for my eyes. I was able to pick that up, and where I became real comfortable looking at that part of the ball, not only for catching, but for hitting. If I hit the lower left-hand part of the ball, that means I was always working from the inside out part of the baseball. So that was a comfortable spot for my eyes to focus on that ball. And it also gave me a thought, like when I'm going bad and I'm just searching, I wasn't looking for the lower left-hand part of the ball. So it was a constant reminder to narrow focus.
General focus.
Part of it. Yeah. Look at that lower left-hand part of that ball.
Yeah, and I think an important thing too for all the coaches and players in here is you need to experiment. Each player may be different. You need to play with different quadrants of the ball. Find out what makes them successful. It may not make a lot of sense. Like, why would for me, I like the lower outside part of the ball, and people go, why? You're going to wrap around it. Well, I look at driving through the ball. It gives me a better feel than looking at the inside part of the ball. And this could be golf. This could be, whatever sport you're playing, is just, aim small, but also your eyes guide your body, and learning to look, your body will take care of itself and more times than not. Now, I'm not saying don't train your body, because you need to, but when it comes to performance, this goes back to, being in that zone state, doing our task is we got to be focused on the ball, not focused on everything else.
That's limiting thoughts, not going in the future, not going in the past, and having those things that going to that lower left-hand part of the ball reduced my thoughts,
Yeah. So kind of sum it up a little bit on pitch recognition, because we can go over a lot of different topics here, but hitters got to get really good, and I can't see on my camera here, but it's really getting good at picking this ball up out of this release point. And one of the things that happens is when you tend to stare or over focus, we tend not to see really well. So it's learning a method of how to switch your eyes at the right time to that release point. You don't want to be there too early. You don't want to be there too late. And when you get there at the right time, that's where we see the sharpest. That's where we see the clearest. That's where our brain is highlighting what we're looking at. And if I'm looking at something 6 inches, a foot away, 2 feet away, you don't see the clarity of the ball like you need to make the reaction. We have a very small area of clarity, surprisingly, in our eye. And so I think of it like a laser beam, is we got to get that laser beam on the right spot. So that's why we talk about aim small, miss small, and then getting good at making sure we're doing our best to track it as long as possible. We may not see it hit the bat. We may not see it all the way, but every inch counts as far as how long we could see that. And that's what slows it down. That's what gives us more time to make a reaction.
That's huge, right? Because what I remember, like I was telling you, I remember it being a timing thing. When I was going locked in good, it was, and like I said, there's teaching of whole body, open, soft focus, narrow focus, and then release point. And mine was more like soft focus on everything and kind of cone it right into that spot. And when I was going good, that it was a timing thing, that is just like my swing, the timing of that vision was locked in too, to where it was like sometimes when I was going good, I didn't even know what I was doing. It was just happening so effortlessly.
Well, you know what amazes me with all the teams and the players I've worked with, whether it's college baseball, softball, pro baseball, I'll ask hitters all the time, where are you looking when you step in the box? And they all look at me and go, what do you mean? I'm just kind of looking out there. I'm like, okay, so what happens when the pitcher, starts his motion? What are you looking at? I don't know. It's just kind of generally, I don't know. Yeah, good question. I don't know. Okay, now how about here? Well, I think I'm picking up the arm slot. And I said, well, arm slot or the ball? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, do you do that every time? And they're like, no. So, that's one thing I would start trying to ask your players is, what are they looking at the right times? Where are you picking things up early? Where are you seeing things late? And give yourself a method of how to be more consistent at it. Question we have here from Mike Diaz is, what process of drills do you teach youth players to understand how to become better at vision performance?
I actually have I don't know if you can see it. I have that, if anybody knows Slow the Game Down, that chart. It has the different balls with the different, has the numbers, a different sport on it.
So visual performance cross trainer posters.
Yeah, that's right. Have a couple right inside my door. I'm actually inside the office, and I have a batting cage right there where I do a lot of my lessons and team stuff. But and it's on the door there. But I have them as one of my stations, as one of the starting stations, is just simple getting in the box, them giving themselves that affirmation as they're getting into the box and warming up their eyes, as simple as going through at a young age, 6, 7 years old, is seeing that number and recognizing the sport behind the ball and the numbers where their eyes search. You're using all those different muscles in your eyes that you don't normally, as they scan the board. Them being able to be relaxed, because there is a pressure internally, like, oh, I want to find the next number being quicker, like we all do, for them to be comfortable in that spot while their eyes relax and just scan the board like our eyes do when we're waiting for the pitcher. And then once they find that number, the 2, the 3, or 4, whatever's, I have them do 3, as there's 3 pitches, 1, 2, or 3. And then I actually have them step out of the box, and then they get back in the box and do number 4, 5, and 6. But also once they see that number, and then in their mind, they say tennis ball, 2, football, 3, soccer ball, and try to not move their head and recognize that and use that as the same part of your brain that recognizes fastball, curveball, changeup, slider, same part of your brain that recognizes that. So that's it. And it also generally gets them thinking, all right, I can pick this ball up soon. It gets those young kids thinking, oh, okay, I can see spin. I can pick that up. That's the same part of that. And they're also being conscious of not moving their head and trying to, as they lunge, and using that as a visual teacher. So that's one of my ones that's entry level that I used, even just a simple, as I'm getting in the box, to wake up my eyes, say, all right, here we going. But also as a youth, my 6-year-olds, my youngest one does that drill. And I actually sent Ryan a picture the other day as I was hitting with my older kids. I sent him a picture of my little one standing on, I have one of those Spark boards that's a balance board. And I also have like a balance board. It's like the the skateboard one with the ball in the middle, and they sit there and balance and do that. I do that drill with that as well, not just a batter's box, but I have them doing something where it's balanced. They're doing something athletic with that as well. And then I actually have, I'll grab these. Anybody seen these? Like these little light things that pop up. It's out of reaction where you're touching it. I do that for my catchers to light that up for recognition. And then also the, which we all know, the bead drill for depth perception. Those are my 3 core that I do every day with my younger kids, my older kids, and some of the pros that come in and work with me before they go out in training.
And also the small ball training that I know you do a lot of with the Max BP. You do a lot of things with catching as well as hitting and tracking with those.
Yeah, I guess I mean, that is visual training, but I do that. It's just part of my regimen. I don't have it in here. It's actually down in the gym to where I have the Max BP. I like that because it throws off-speed pitches as well. But where you narrow down the focus of that ball, even on that smaller ball, to a smaller defined spot, it makes it so that when this baseball comes in there, it looks like a grapefruit, and catching with that and learning how to catch with these 3 fingers to where you're really trying to get the golf ball size ball with that max bat receiving as catchers catching in this small spot. I find that even when I did it, when I played, I would do that every day before I started my catchers drills from about, I guess it was about 08 until even now with my kids doing that before I start catching. That's the first catch and drill I do with those balls with that max bat machine.
In fact, John, I think with the catching drills, you created your own little glove so that it's catching skin between the thumb and the forefinger.
Yeah, I started working with lizard skin, making a glove that had like a little net right in between here to where that ball would hit and catch with that glove. So it kind of narrowed. The net was about yay big. But I never really got into putting those into circulation just because, China happened, right? So we don't need to get into that. It's a whole nother podcast. But
I think the wiffle balls and the small balls are really good. And there was actually a video of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. the other day hitting Tias. And the Vatias are fun, which are kind of bottle caps that come from the big 5-gallon water bottles. And they're spinning those. We have some that are, we call them tracking discs, but they're kind of rubber, and you can fling them and they can hit them, and you can catch them. And also for the catchers to work on catching like this, and you see a lot of videos, guys with beans. There was another video of a Cub player hitting a Nerf gun
with a little gun. And 2, if you see the bats, I know Skills makes one. Those little smaller bats, that also adds a thing to it. And what I like about those is when you do with the max bat, so you get the max bat machine, and then you get the smaller, skinnier bat. I like that because if you tend to tighten up when you go to hit with that smaller bat, when that tightens up, that changes the bat path quite a bit when you're using that smaller bat, that you got to kind of stay loose through the swing, because if you tighten up with that, it seems like that the contact will dramatically go down if you see your guys, because you'll see them. And it's a good drill too, because you don't hit the balls consistently with a small ball, and then you get that max bat machine turned up, max BP machine turned up. It's good to see what your hitters are doing psychologically, because you see them, they get in there, they start gripping it harder and harder. And if you do that with that skinny bat, no bueno. You got to do it. You got to go almost feel more relaxed. And having that skinny bat makes you stay those loose arms and loose hands through the swing, and then that helps keep the bat path, and also psychologically, so they don't think, oh, I got to try harder.
Yeah, there's a couple things that happen when using like the Max BP. First of all, a lot of guys tend to want to stare right at the hole, and they struggle seeing. And this is another thing about working on early recognition, is learning how to switch at the right time to seeing that ball come out. And then it's really good is what happens is they tend to want to muscle up and try to do a lot. So they swing, and then you see their head go flying open on here, and forcing them to track the ball close to contact, through contact as much as possible. And one of the drills that we tend to use from a tracking drill, not a hitting drill, is getting up there and use your backhand to catch the ball. We call it the Barry Bonds drill. This is what Barry used to do with the jugs pitching machine and a glove in his hand. And I don't recommend it because people get scared and they're going to hurt their hand. But we do it with the wiffle ball machine, and it still does sting, and it hurts a lot when they jump at it or they don't track it. When they trust and they see, it gets a lot easier to catch that and receive it.
And also what I've done too is I took a handful of those balls on the Max BP balls, and on the balls I put numbers on there on each side of the ball, right? And you remember the big tennis balls that shoot the 150, 60 miles an hour. You've seen that? Well, I put the numbers on that because I found that if I do that, my eyes can see the color of it. Sometimes it takes a little snapshot of the number because I could see it as it goes by. My eyes take a snapshot of that, and when I'm doing the tracking drill, and where I track it all the way, and I can see that.
Gives you something to focus on.
Correct.
Yeah. In fact, I was talking to Jeremy Giambi the other day. He called me, and he goes, "Hey, remember that machine I used to hit in my house and knock the lamps over? So this is for all you guys out there. You can take it in and hit indoors. Your parents may not be happy, but it's a way you can shoot some balls and get some batting practice at this time in your house."
Yeah. It's been a huge tool for me that I definitely use quite a bit, and seeing too my younger kids doing it now, it's a tool that I see, and even before games, because now if you play these tournament play, right, you go there, you got this little side field to go onto. It's a huge tool because you don't always have space for batting practice sometimes when you go do this tournament play. So it's definitely a tool that I feel like I've had advantage over some teams with.
Yeah. Now, Ryan asked a question here. Can you explain what the bead drill is? Ryan, we have a little tool that we've used. It's called the eye track. There's some other names for it. And it's a string with about 5 different beads on there. And it's used in the optometric world a lot of times, not always properly, but it's used as an evaluation tool of, basically understanding where the 2 eyes are aiming, and if the eyes are aiming in front or they're aiming past. And what happens, which is tough for a lot of coaches to understand, is sometimes you have a hitter that's always late on a pitch, and you want them to start earlier. But a lot of times it's not the mechanics that's causing them to be late. It's how their brain perceives the visual information. Their eyes may aim past an object, and so balls tend to jump on them. And sometimes you have the opposite, where a guy's always pulling a ball, always out in front, always pulling, can't stay back on a pitch. Their eyes see things a little bit closer to them than it actually is. So they can get their eyes to, one, it gives feedback of how their eyes are aiming. It also tells you if your brain is using the right eye or left eye, or if they're using both eyes. And what we can do is do some exercises of getting the eyes to aim in the right spot, but also the muscles of the eyes to move up and down. There's actually 14 muscles of the eye, 7 in each eye, 12 that are involved in tracking a ball. And these muscles are really, really strong. We can't get them bigger, bulkier, or stronger in a way, but what we can do is get them to work more efficiently, get the neural pathways to fire those muscles more efficiently. And there are a lot of players, even at the big league level, that have tight eye muscles. And so we use the cord as a basic way to start and evaluate and start some training. But then what John referred to earlier is our 3D depth perception tracking trainer is the product that a lot of our pros and college teams use to get their eyes to work more efficiently and better. So they can get, in a nutshell, their brain to work more efficiently, their eyes aimed in the right spot, and doing some exercises. And the truth is, guys see things pretty well when they get those eyes working right.
Also, to add to that too, it was, and we have concussion protocols and stuff, and that with that depth perception one, I remember talking with Ryan when I was in Toronto. I slid into second, took a knee to the head, and hit, and I definitely had a concussion. And the drill, I kind of got through the concussion protocol fine, but I remember doing this, and I'm calling around like, this ain't right. Like, I'm good at this, and I do this quite often. I'm not doing this right. And it was something there that picked up, and I remember giving Ryan some feedback on that. And so that was a way that I could evaluate something wasn't quite right either, because that depth perception wasn't quite on too. So it could be an evaluation tool as well.
Yeah, we see that a lot in catchers, and it's something we can probably have an hour conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not trying to plug everything, but one of the things we are doing is with our NDV performance, we have an academy that we've created that will start training some of these skill sets for coaches or trainers that want to learn how to evaluate and test. And that's going to be at academy.ndvperformance.com. So we can put that in there so you guys can see that if you're interested. Blake just sent one. If you have one visual drill to warm up before a game, what would you do?
Oh, for me? What
Yeah.
does it say, Ryan? It says, for me, I would probably, I like that chart, because it kind of, with all those muscles that you say going, it kind of hits all those. Those was the ones that I liked, was getting on that chart and seeing the different numbers, because my eyes had to scan. It had recognition, and then it also had that mental, like I felt like I was trying to rush to go to the next number. We'll just relax and let my eyes scan. I felt like it was kind of a warm up for my eyes visually to go through that, hit all those things like what Ryan was talking about, all those muscles that needed to be hit on. And then also the depth perception with the two dots, putting them together to make that 3D image. Those were my go-to drills that I did every day in my locker before I walked out on the field.
Yeah, Blake, you set me up for a loaded question here.
That's why I was like, is he talking to you or is he talking to me? Because I know where you want to go with this.
One visual drill. Now that depends on a lot of different things. You know, the depth perception obviously is something I want their eyes to get warmed up and their brain warmed up. But if they're not using tools, the one thing that they need to get really good at is getting down in the bullpen with visual intent. Get in there and work on picking the ball up out of the release point and work on tracking. Not sitting down there and talking and just kind of going through the motions. They really got to get good at picking the ball up early and seeing the ball all the way. And then, like John talked about, is step out and visualize. What would you have done to that pitch? Would you have hit it or would you have taken it? And visualize how you would have taken that pitch, or visualize how you'd swing at it and actually put a live swing. So if you have that time, that's what I would do to get warmed up and ready to go.
And that's a good time too, coaches, to say that's that mental picture of detail, getting detail of that pitch of what it looks like to go past when your hitters get in there and track pitches, or your catchers, to visually get in there. What's Harvey's sinker doing compared to his slider, compared to his four-seamer? Like, what does that look like coming in? And visually, in their mind's eye, play that over. And that's the time to solidify that visual imprint into your brain, is in that bullpen, is to solidify that. So when you're being able to recall that in your visualization, you know what that is, so you can kind of be creative of having a real solid image comes in. So when you're visualizing contact, that's the spot to create those images in your brain.
Hey, Lindsay, I know you're on there. I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to see if you can talk about some of the things that you guys do at LSU to warm those eyes up. You there, Lindsay? Lindsay?
Yeah.
I'm caught you off guard. I wanted to ask you some of the things you do to get your team's eyes warmed up before the games.
I think before the games, like during BP, we split into 2 rounds. So we have a group hitting at one time that's in the cage hitting, you know, like 2 front tosses and then 2 lives. One of the lives is like a gas, kind of whatever we're going to see, spin or some fuzz, something like that. And then the other round is they're stretching and they're doing like small ball catching stuff during that time. So like we're just trying to get them to switch their eyes wherever we can and try to get some of those things to happen. We also, in BP, one of the BP stations is one of your stickers that has the tracking things on it. Yeah, that right there. Thanks. I couldn't get that out. We have one of those big stickers on one of our metal wall, like doors in the cage. And so that's one of the stations too. Just trying to get them to focus like from big to small, get their eyes functioning a little bit. We use those in the dugout too, which we have some kids that really buy into them and really like them, like in their, like their fourth station before they're on deck. And then we have some kids that are like, I don't like this at all. So we try and just work towards who gets it the most.
Thanks, Lindsay.
No problem.
Hey, John, we're going to wrap this up. We could otherwise, if you guys knew John and I, we'd probably talk for 8 hours on this, and he may be a frequent guest down the road here. But obviously we're in an interesting time period right now. What are some, suggestions, thoughts from a major league player that has 11 years experience? What are some of the things you either mentally, visually, physically, with a lot of stuff or zero stuff to get yourself prepared for what's next?
I think emphasizing to the players that really want to move forward and progress their game is point out to them that the players who succeed, who are those 1%ers that are special, are the ones that take times like these, and when everybody else is saying, woe is me, I can't do this, I can't do that, those 1%ers are taking this time to move forward, get better, and turn it into a plus. Like I've told my son, and he thinks I'm crazy, I'm like, do you realize how much stronger and how much faster and how much better your hand-eye coordination get compared to everybody else right now? Because I just know that human nature will make them sit back because there's no eyes, no coaches watching them. And to stress to your guys that the ones who really want to move forward, and it's going to be very relevant who did it and who didn't when, the only eyes on yourself are yourself, and the work that you put in when nobody else is looking, that's going to show up quite a bit when, everything gets lifted off of this. Is you're going to see the people who took advantage of this time. So I think right now is an important time that's going to separate the character of your players, and it's going to be real evident of who are the ones that stepped up, made the most of this time. And I think it'll be no mistake that those are probably the leaders on your team, probably the leaders in your community in the future. And it's a good time to separate yourself as an individual, I think, if you take advantage of this. I would say not just downer, but possibilities of change of life that's going on right now.
Yeah. And I think for me, for some of the coaches out there, this is an opportunity for some of your players to recharge and, look at the game, understand the game. Sometimes we get in this rut of swing, 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 and we forget to look at what the task is and some of the goals as well. And, from a visual standpoint, from my bias, there's definitely a lot of things that can be done. There's some complex things and there's some simple things. Simple things are even the infielders taking, balls off the wall, which you see a lot of people do. Now, just one of my twists to that, and some of you guys might know this, is we have this ball that we use that's got numbers on it, and it's a rubber ball, and it bounces differently off the wall. But getting some, whether it's a letter or numbers on the tennis balls, when you're bouncing them, when they're catching them, is getting their eyes to recognize the letter or the number once they catch it. Not out in front so they're here, but just really working on tracking their eyes and getting their eyes to work a little bit longer. There's software, there's, wiffle ball machines, there's a lot discs, there's bottle caps, there's pinto beans, a lot of different ways that they can work on their eye-hand coordination, their depth perception, their tracking skills, visual performance skills. So it is an opportunity when they have some downtime to get a little bit better at that. I also got to ask this question, and Dr. Fallon, I know, is on here, and this was a question from him, and I'm hoping I'm going to get him as a guest at some point on here. But I want to know, does your ability to see the rotation of the ball vary according to any rhythm or cycle? Example, does the day, the weeks, or the months, does that change how well you see the rotation? And I think what you're asking, Dr. Fallon, is a little bit, does fatigue, stress, night travel, day travel, early games, all those affect how he sees the ball?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it became more relevant as I got older. The latter part of my career is that 8 hours of sleep and that travel going from East Coast to West Coast, from New York to LA. The bat seemed a little bit slower. I wasn't picking up on things a little bit quicker. But so, yeah, I think it does have a big factor. Being able to the quality of sleep and what your brain and how it recovers while you're asleep. I'm a big believer in it more now because I had to experience the latter years of my career, and the more I've studied some of the stuff with Ryan and some of the other stuff that I got into, I think if I would have realized how important it was, I maybe even would have took it even a little bit more serious. But I could for sure feel a difference from East Coast to West Coast trips, and I don't think that's any secret why they've gave us catchers maybe the day off after a long travel day like that. That would usually be our day off, and I think it's for reasons for that nature. But I could definitely feel if I was well rested and recovered, my reaction time was definitely a lot better. So I think sleep habits and it definitely had a big effect on it. And then also too, more later in my career, stress levels and things started. I think that had a lot to do with it too, because then all of a sudden we had twins in the NIC unit 1 year going on. I had, my wife was sick, had preeclampsia. And I remember during that time not having as good a sleep, your strep inhibitors and things going on in your body. My sleep patterns were terrible, with all that going on. And I remember having a slow bat, getting fooled on pitches more than I used to. My receiving ratings were not as good. And I, without a doubt, feel like that all has a factor in that. And to be able to reduce those, the next year, the next 2 years after that, after my kids were good, well, and healthy, and my wife was healthy and I was sleeping better, my stats. And then the year after that went on to be an all-star. So those were that's, I guess, the happier times and the most balanced, I guess I could say, of my sleep patterns and stuff. And I don't think there's any secret to why I played good, is because I think that was a big factor.
I think we're going to have Dr. Fallon for an hour talking about this too. It'll be fascinating on there. But, appreciate everyone coming on. We spent an hour here. Again, like I said, we can spend a long time. A couple things. This is kind of a new format. We're in a new era, so I'm going to try to do more of these. We have a couple scheduled coming up. We'll have with Synaptic, which is a vision training program, on Wednesday. And then I'll also have a softball one with Coach Craig Snyder from Texas A&M on Friday. And then the following Monday in a week, we'll have Sean Casey will be in. And then we'll be doing a tennis one next Friday and probably another one on Wednesday as well. So keep, your questions coming. Give us any feedback, positive, negatives. Just trying to educate and try to get some information out there and try to be helpful in this time when we all have too much time now. We always complain about not having enough time, and now we have too much time. So again, appreciate you guys all coming, and send any questions to John or I, and I'll make sure John gets them. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ryan.